found a pocket, a group of people, a pocket of those who understand what we're talking about, Mark. You absolutely nailed it. Welcome to the episode.
Thank you, Adam. It's great to be here.
Yeah, yeah. As I always do, I'm going to give a little context. And one of my kids heard the title of the episode, Brand Inside Out, and they said, You can talk about the cartoon Inside Out? I said, No, no, no. That's a wonderful cartoon, but that's not what we're going to talk about. And Mark,
Exactly.
what an exciting week for you to join. You and I just discussed an episode that was launched a few days ago with Jennifer Parktek and how
Mhm.
brand is customer experience plus employee experience. And I gotta say, I have this almost cognitive dissonance when I speak to the innovators in the space like you and the others we found, and the way the energy and how we understand, and almost a lot of the things we say, let's do this. This makes absolute sense. Then
Mhm.
I go share with the rest of the world, and I'm getting this. Whoa, wait a second. What are you talking? This is not how things work. Innovators happen to be a small percentage of the total population for any new movement,
Mhm.
and we are a movement. The podcast went from let's have the conversations and best
Yeah.
practices to now, I think this is an emerging market to
Mhm.
consumerize the employee experience, but
Yeah.
really foundationally to think about a brand from inside and out. And you're doing amazing work in your organization, Signature Performance, and the impact you're creating in the healthcare industry. We could do a separate episode on that. But what blew me away, Mark, what blew me away is even the title. When I first connected with you, when I was doing the research, CEO, right? For those listening, of course, that makes sense. You're the chief executive officer, but you're not.
Right.
Mark, what are you if not the
Yeah. So
CEO, executive officer?
yeah. And in my career, I've been fortunate enough to have that title, but I'll tell you, I'm the chief experience officer, and when we think about kind of the role of the CEO. By the way, I work really close with our founder and CEO, and part of the reason why I'm so excited is that this vision was set about 14 years ago, and I get to be the one to articulate it and bring it to life. But the experience is really becoming a movement. And Adam, one of the things I think is really important for everyone to understand, what we're really talking about here is the future of work, because things are changing so quick. So I always call it the speed of business.
Hmm.
And at Signature Performance, and the problems we're solving are getting larger, more complex, and the speed of business has accelerated. And so when you talk about inside out, and you talk about titles, and you talk about everything, I just feel like everything is slowly kind of evolving to this understanding that experience matters, and how you build an organization from the inside out is going to be paramount to how you're going to attract and retain the best and brightest workforce in the future and meet your client needs. And so I think it's going to be an imperative. At one point, we're probably going to look back and go, I can't believe people didn't trust us on this. But what I love about your podcast and what you've brought to the table, Adam, is you've found a pocket of like-minded people who believe in humanity and understand that in order to have this authentic, and that's a marketing term, authentic persona, it has to truly be lived values to the core of an organization. And how do you transform that if it's not inside out?
You gave me goosebumps there for a second because this is my life's work. And it started 10 years ago when I was an ink contributing writer and wrote a book, talked about
Mm,
purpose and values. And since then, it's just, it's now emerging from a concept and almost a philosophical approach to how
yeah,
do we actually do this. And what I find really interesting is you said experience multiple times. You didn't clarify. You didn't say customer experience or employee experience. You went from experience to the
I did.
human element in
Yes.
how we're thinking about it. So, it took you 14 years. And for those listening, I don't think it's going to take you 14 years if you set out on this journey, because we get the benefit of hearing to folks like Mark share with how they've done it. But I want to start with something that is, in my view, and I just had a heated debate on this last night. Like it got really, really heated with a couple team members, and
Sure.
we talked about, what areas should you lead for whomever kind
Mm,
of is taking the leadership role from an experience perspective. And as I look at your LinkedIn and our conversations, you've brought a number of it, you've unified, right? You've unified the areas. So would you mind sharing with the audience, as a chief experience officer, what areas roll up into your world?
yeah. Great question, Adam. So here's the interesting thing. In my career, I've been a CEO. I've been a CMO and I've been a Chief Human Resource Officer, CHRO. I've had a large kind of runway. So I've been blessed to have a lot of different kinds of experience. The team that I'm on, really set out with one thing. It's like, what's the best of Mark Mathias? So I was given a golden ticket and said, define that. And so we kind of translated from, I had each pocket, I mushed a couple together. I got out of that. I started org development because we had rapid growth, speed of business. So all of it said, we finally landed on, with some brilliant minds who surround me, by the way. I have partners in this that are absolutely what I would consider the best in the experience business. As this umbrella experience. And so right now, experience consists of a few things. We just had this talk the other day because I was quizzing the team. I'm like, what's essential, right? And they said, well, first of all, internal comm. So you have to think corporate communications. It's essential, not for what you think, right? Everyone thinks, oh, then you get to send out, and as you commoditize talent within your organization, you're just pitching and stuff. No, we actually need to clear the noise, because the organization couldn't hear us. Without having corporate communications and the communication element, I never would have been able to deliver a message that is believable, that people could rally behind. So corporate communications became a big part of this. Organizational development, which is training, development. How we do that is a cornerstone of what we do, because the workforce of tomorrow wants to learn and grow. And I think we're going to be in a situation where hyperinflation is going to take over the talent market in terms of what they're talking about. So you better have other things in place for them to be able to advance their career. So this organizational development came as part of it. And then talent, right? And at Signature Performance, we've changed from a human resource group to a talent organization. I look at everyone I coach and work with as talent. The underpinning belief is that everyone has the answer within them. It's the organization's job to give process and method to pulling it out of the individual so that they can do their best work on what they're working on. So we have talent operations, which would be your typical, human resource, all the data, everything we need to do to stay compliant. And then you have talent acquisition, which we specialized because the attraction phase, call that the marketer in me. I recognize that to get the greatest talent, we've got to get this message we've kind of curated inside out to the general public. And talent acquisitions and the recruiting team that we have put in place is essential for that. And so you have the overall kind of umbrellas experience, but it has talent acquisition, talent operations, it has organizational development, training and development, and then engagement comes up under that. And so that's where we get our strength, is in the data that comes through everything we do internally. We're always measuring it, and we're always kind of asking ourselves, how are we doing? Where do we need to go next?
Burning down my CPU with brilliance. I was like, I want to make a comment there and there.
Yeah.
Even when you started, you said, the CEO used to be a CMO and a CHRO. Oh my goodness, that right there, the
Yes.
partnership between those two. Because even in this innovator space that we're creating, there's also two schools of thought. Should the CMO get involved?
Yeah.
Or should the CHRO expand its capabilities to now include marketing like? In fact, there was a quote I was playing with yesterday. I was looking at what is the difference between sales and marketing.
Yeah.
And marketing owns the message, sales owns the relationship. And you said internal communications is the beginning point, because if I ask the same question, but HR, what's the difference between HR and marketing looking internally? Marketing owns the message, HR owns the relationship. Right. Fascinating to think about that message being one brand.
Yes.
One team that owns it, and you're bringing those two mindsets. So I want to sharply turn the conversation from how exciting it is to how difficult it is, because I feel like those that are listening in, I'm like, this is exciting, this is amazing, Mark. But it wasn't easy for you to get here. So would you mind, like, you got talent acquisition, talent operations, brand, experience, D&I, like how'd you get here? What did you have to overcome? What kind of mindset shifts that you were looking to create? So maybe a few stories of challenges would be helpful.
Yeah, Adam, great. Another great question, because it's part of the journey, right? So I would just tell you this: anytime there's a transformation or shift, in the marketplace, whether it be with talent or taking this idea. Hey, we started as let's see what we could do with this, right? So it was an idea, it was an aspiration. This was part of our vision statement early on, and to create an experience unlike anything the industry has ever seen. And so stepping into that, right, all of a sudden you become this weird cost center that's kind of touching the whole organization. But the first thing I had to overcome is I had to get the entire team, my executive team, which I serve with in particular, to really believe that this isn't just another cost center, right? And if you look at the future of work, I'll tell you this, Adam, it used to be back in the day that our greatest assets was our tangible assets. So our companies were valued based on the clients we had, the buildings we owned, the chairs, the computers, the desks, the technology, the trademarks, all that stuff. I am telling you right now, organizations are valued on the people, period. Now, how do I translate that? That took a lot of work. And there was a lot of disbelief that we had to push through. So I always call that resistance. And it got pretty hard at some points. I remember one time in the organization, it was about 1 year into it, I had hired my first experienced champion, Amy. And she had come on, and this was our first meeting of all our, what we call our President's Club. And kind of this council would gather and we'd talk. And I remember our founder kind of getting up and going, look, we've invested quite a bit in this to create an experience, right? So we're starting this new development. I need to hear, and every business unit was in there. He goes, is it working, or do we need to lay this down? Now, this was like the second day of my new hires, stepping into the company. She happened to be up front because I believe in, hey, get known. And she's kind of giving some data on what we've accomplished. And he said, by show of hands, who wants to continue on? Sometimes business is that way. Sometimes you encounter that resistance. But the beautiful thing about that is I had done the homework, because not only do we have those areas that you talked about, we have this other area called, I don't know if it's a real thing, I'm making this up, Adam, psych ops, right? What's the psychology of the organization? And from my perspective, it's a coaching perspective. I literally, when we began our transformation, did one-on-one coaching with about every associate I could get in front of, to help them see their strengths, their unique talents, unique gift. Because I knew at one time, at some point, that question was going to be asked. And I didn't need a majority. I needed everybody on board. And that's exactly what we got at. So that was barrier one, the arm vote, right? It was like, woo. But then I brought in this brilliant, experienced person who came to me and said, okay, now, Mark, that was terrifying. But from now on, I never want you to win on popular opinion alone. From now on, we're winning on data. And so then we invested in systems and technology and created an infrastructure of data capture that for our organization, this experience side, which would include all those that you said, we put out quarterly report cards to our executive team that stress where we're at, what we've done, the impact we've had, and the ROI that we're driving to the bottom line. And then we verify that and kind of tie them together with how are we performing with our clients. And our clients continually give us report cards, and they're very good about giving us, we're a federal contractor as well as in the private sector. And so we get CPARs and all kinds of feedback. So we just make sure that what I'm selling, what I'm saying internally is matching what the experience is externally. And as long as those things line up, what happens is another click of the flywheel, and the momentum starts going. But it was really hard. And we got to a couple points where, we didn't know if we're going to go. It looks like a big old expense. And then I finally was able to show them through the data that every nickel they invest in experience comes back to the organization dressed up like a quarter.
Real quick, Amy's background.
Yeah.
She was your first hire into the investment to make an experience, right?
Yeah. And she is actually my partner. She's our vice president of experience. And so her background was marketing and communication. I think she had a British literature degree. But the interesting thing, she was in a large Fortune 500 organization that was going through some transformation, and they kind of had her off in a corner. And they said, we don't know what's going to happen. A lot of people were leaving. She was, part of the internal corporate communication team, worked from the president on down. Well, obviously that got a little rough, and they just paid her to research. And so I think she had about 6 months worth of research that was just brilliant. When we first met, I outlined my vision of people. She combined it with experience, walked me through the employee life cycle as she sees it. So if you think of a brand life cycle for a product, we walk through an employee life cycle all the way from attraction, join, grow, belong, advance within the firm, what that means, and then how do we measure it, and then how do we build upon it. So that's where the spark was. And so, now we've had multiple years of working together and been able to bring this thing to life and kind of, adding on things like that became really, the heartbeat of this organization, like our diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and how do we functionalize it? And I think that's the brilliant thing, Adam, because so many people like this conceptually, but you have to have a sound mind of business integration. It can't just be words. It has to be seen, heard, and felt. And to get that, it's one-on-one, it's roll up your sleeves, it's functional, and then everyone has our individual role and then our collective role of leading in and helping the organization kind of aspire for. So it's that integration of what we're saying and theorizing into actually producing and showing, and so that people feel me at the end of the day and say, yeah, we're a better company with this team in place.
Totally makes sense. And what I'd like to do is, but before we go there, I'd like to double click on drawing the, ROI connection, because it's not easy, but marketers know how to do it. But before we do, I just want to bring you into my heated debate again from last night. And you've had those internally. And I'm going to simplify the debate in the following way. Is it possible to, you said the words match external to internal, right? Is it possible to match without unification of the, I don't want to say the word ownership, but maybe at least the ownership of the message in that experience between external and internal? Because one person can't own everything. They can't be in charge of operations and like that. That's not practical, but at least from a messaging perspective. So is it possible, in your view, that's the heated debate. I'm even reliving the debate right now.
Yeah. And so it's a debate in our corridor as well. Adam, I'm optimistic. I think it is. You have to draw correlations in the data. And I will tell you that when we talk, right, I built this inside out. So my data is strongest in how the transformation internally is going. And I rely a lot on matching it to the data on the external side. So you've had other people on who've talked about some of the key metrics, and we utilize those as well. So we're looking at attraction, we're looking at retention. How are we doing? What does that mean? I look at referral rates. So when you think of associate, we call our employees associates. When you think of that, we measure ANPS as a component of the overall engagement score. We do 1 external, 3 internal. And then I take that data and then we plug it to outcomes. And so just like a marketer would do with a campaign, we had a Love Your Monday campaign. We looked at the impressions, we looked at the output, we looked at how much talent was entering our pipeline and wanting to join our team. And then we took validation from outside of the organization so that we could say, okay, we don't have any kind of confirmation bias going on here. This is what we're getting. This is what we're seeing. And to be honest, Adam, when I talk with peers in industry, even with folks that are at much larger organizations, I was just at Qualtrics X4 conference. I'm really proud of what we've built here. I've been given a green light to build something unique, and we've been able to do it. But it did take aligning that together, because it's hard enough to get business development or sales with marketing to shake hands. So when you start to kind of unify the whole thing, you've got to have a whole lot of belief coming on within the organization that what is happening is felt. And that belief can only happen if you have extremely high engagement. And that driving engagement consistently, especially post-pandemic, when everything has shifted, is a critical component to make sure that this thing goes forward.
Smiling. This is very therapeutic for me. What you're saying, because we're not alone, right? There are not many, but we know any new market is started by the innovators, 2.5% or so of the entire population. And so I want to go back to the ROI, and I understand that there's a lot of, privacy by your success. You can't, certain things you can't divulge, certain things you can't. You work with the government, you work in the healthcare industry. So my ask of you, right, to the degree that you're allowed, would you mind bolstering a little, just enough? Because the folks that are listening in, I want to connect the dots for them, in a very clear way, because you, in some ways, you're thinking like a marketer, impressions internally. You're thinking about it in funnels, and then this leads to X. What has it led to, Mark, to the degree that you can share publicly?
Yeah. So when we began the transformation, well, like when I joined Signature Performance, now keep in mind that the seeds of what I'm talking about here have been built in since conception as an idea, as a hope, as an aspiration. But being able to bring it together and really try, we've had rapid growth. I would say this, Adam, that we've grown from a federal standpoint, from a small business to we did a little pit stop at a medium business. And then we are now in the large business category. So when you think about the multiple, multipliers of revenue that has to happen to functionally move through that, that in and of itself is a story. From the talent development and size and scope, an organization that started with 4 entrepreneurial thinkers, now we have about 1,700 overall that support our organization. Which, if you're at a really huge company, I know you're saying, well, you're still small to me. No, it's when you come from 4, I'm telling you, that's quite a journey. You have to have stuff wired pretty tight to make it. And so we've seen that kind of growth, and I would say even through pandemic, when things were winding down, pivoting 80% of our workforce in less than 3 days to securely meet the needs of our clients without missing one beat in our metrics was just one testimony to what we're doing. We also have an expanding market, so we're generating and new opportunities, bigger problems to solve in healthcare. And we really have an inflow of talent who wants to join this team. And not just talent, diverse. The best talent from around the country now is kind of lining up at our door to say, hey, I want to be part of this. It's a little bit different. And so those are a few things that I would say. We have an associate net promoter score I'll share with you that's typically above 50 all the time. A high, we were about close to 80. At one point. And so we measure that, my personal metric and what I hold the team to is we won't see a variation, that's more than 10 points. Too much, too high, I'm asking myself, well, that's great. I'm glad people are bought in, but then I have to stabilize it and say, how do I keep them satisfied for the future? And I don't want them working the system, working the ANPS system. If it's too low, then I'm saying, hey, we have an issue. Same thing with, things like our retention statistics. By the way, Signature Performance, we've evolved from processing medical claims, the talent and technology behind that, to actually supporting via a contact center. And so when you get in the call center world, that's an entire different string of metrics and an entire different job. Because having that phone, and we deal with complicated issues in veterans' lives. And we love veterans. We just absolutely do. We serve the community. So how do we do that and maintain a high NPS? It's rare. I don't know if I've seen it, certainly not in my local community, but that's an NPS we're maintaining, even though we've expanded into typically kind of a world that says, I just don't want to be in a call center type environment. And we're solving some really complex healthcare issues for important people face to face. And so it's really been kind of a great way to illustrate the kind of impact that we're having, both for veterans across the nation and then healthcare providers who really need a break. They do. This administrative stuff is out of control. It's too expensive. We've got to lower that, and they need a respite from it so that they can treat patients.
Amazing. And anyone listening in, I think based on what you just shared, the proof is there. It works. So where I want to go next, and again, Mark, you can choose to either talk about your current resources or
Sure.
what you think is an ideal state. So someone listening in says, okay, well, if we're going to build an employee experience team, right? Team.
Yeah.
And you already mentioned it's important to be data driven, right? There's infrastructure, there's results, there's impact, there's single source of truth on the data. You said the words not winning unpopular opinion, right? Not popular.
Yep.
Amy, I think, was like, oh, no,
Yeah,
we
she
can't
did.
do this again. So, Mark, what would someone do? Again, either from the perspective of the CMO,
Mm-hmm.
who's been given the green light to say build the capabilities for the internal experience to match the or a CHRO who's
Mhm.
been given the green light to say, okay, build it. What would it take? Who do we
Mhm.
need to hire? Do we bring in agencies? Like how do they approach it?
Yeah, great. Okay, so everybody's situation is going to be a little bit different in the complexity. Being a federal contractor, you know that the CHR role is a more complex role there because we have a lot of regulations that we have to follow. So you can get caught up in the regulation. So it really takes a real focused effort and belief. We started, and I'll just give you my experience of what we did. That's where internal comm came in. And at that point, there wasn't a lot of internal comm tools, so we couldn't treat it like we would a brand campaign, right? So how do you monetize? How do you not commoditize that in your language, right? How do you all of a sudden do that? Well, we had to seek and find, and we finally found internal communication platforms. At that point, we were wrestling with brand because I had handed that off and it wasn't consolidated at that point, saying we can't use we can't use these old tools. We need to use this new tool. Why? Because it's designed for internal comm. I'll get the data I need, and I need to close the airwaves. The other thing, and when I say close the airwaves, not restrict communication, but only send important communication because the messaging was flat. So we started with internal comm because nobody was hearing anybody because everybody was talking over everybody. So when we started to consolidate, the very first thing we did is we took our efforts, focused on that, and fixed it. How do we quiet things down, push out what needs to be pushed, and have a single source of truth for our internal communications that would lead then to the branching into the external brand? So once we felt like we really had a handle on that and people were actually reading their emails again and not mad at everybody all the time for the amount and volume of emails that were coming in, that's when development came in. And so you have to have this really tight partnership with that. Now, there's another debate, and Adam, you've probably stayed up late talking about this. Does this associate development, does this soft skills training, is this coaching, is this really important in organizations? And I would tell you this, it is vital. In order for this to be successful, you have got to raise the EQ or the whatever you want to call it within the company so that human connection can happen. Because belief is always broken if there's a missing link. And so we're always looking at ways that we can reinforce those skills. And by the way, can you measure them? Well, we measure them in the output. How's our client experiencing them? We measure them through programs that we've committed. This is a statistic we just found the other day. I found it fascinating. People, our associates, our talent who's engaging in our educational curriculum, and we have all kinds. Right now, I'm on a big well-being kick, so we have a 40-day immersive well-being program for our associates called the Aloha Method of Well-being, and it's daily for 40 days. People who are getting involved with our program are staying a year or more. We have less than a percentage of those people engaged in the learning that are leaving. Now, think about that for a second. So, how important is it? Very important. So, we started out with CorpCom, then we went to development, and then is when we actually started broadening this out. And the work we're doing now that we're going through this transformation as we speak is from human resources to talent operations. And that is a transformation that everyone in my human resource team had their hands up saying, we want to be known as something different. I don't want to be the compliance person. I want to have human to human relationships. And so we're now navigating and transforming that. But if you can measure where you're at, whatever you're building on, focus on it sharp enough just to get that right, you'll start to kind of, I always use that flywheel analogy, make a click away at the flywheel. And then like John Maxwell always says that momentum solves 85% of your problems. Get momentum in one part, get really good at it, be the best that people have ever seen. Let that momentum carry you. And then you just start the transformation from the inside out, one thing at a time. I don't know if it needs to be internal comm, Adam, to be honest with you. That's just where Amy's specialty was. That's where my inclination was as a people person. And that's where we started. But I thought it was brilliant because we had noisy airwaves and no one was listening anyway. So at that point, I wasn't going to get any messaging across effectively until we had that a little bit better managed. Adam, I lost volume on you here.
Oh, I'm back.
Okay,
I
there
think
you go.
I have a little thing that clicks to capture the moment, a marker, and I clicked instead of the marker the mute button.
Oh, gotcha.
The
Okay, good.
couple things that stood out for me there. The first one was you said those who were more engaged with wellness,
Yeah.
right? They improved. You said retention, right?
Yeah, yeah, and that was just part of a training program, right? So it's a well-being training program, but that's why it was so key. It's like you have to create things that people want to participate in. And so when you talk about commoditizing the people experience, it's like give them what they want. It didn't take me it wasn't a rocket. I wasn't a genius to figure out coming out of a pandemic into a cycle of burnout. We better start addressing things like well-being in a tangible real way, so that we could advance. Now, I had no idea that our training was having that kind of impact on our retention, but I do now because the data led us there. So we did what was right, and then we follow up with the data. And we're always measuring, are we doing good? Are people liking what we're doing? Is it having an impact? But that is one tangible way that soft skill stuff is no longer soft. And again, I will tell you that the valuation of a company at the end of the day is based on its people. It's not their buildings anymore. No one gives anything about buildings.
Totally, totally. Um, let's go back to your statement about internal comms, and maybe
Yeah.
let's pontificate there together.
Okay.
Because I think in some ways, I'm going to make an argument and join you and just
Okay.
say that this is a anchor. This is the linchpin.
Hmm.
Because when we think about, forget the word internal communications, let's just
Sure.
focus on the simple manifestation of it, which is a message.
Yes.
Who owns the way the message shows up?
Hmm.
Because if we, whatever else we do, that message is the way you will start to experience the brand. If you look
Right.
externally, who sees the message? Whether that message is in Super Bowl
Hmm.
commercial, on your Instagram, whether that's received in the mail. Well, mail not as much these days. Maybe
Yeah.
catalogs. So, if it is indeed the message, which I think this is where we begin,
Yeah.
we just pause there and we say, who owns the message, right?
Hmm.
Then I think we start asking questions, and maybe here I'm moving into future state, but when you respond, you can take me back if you weren't with me on the message. But
Yeah.
we start to ask, if it is the message, well, when is it sent? Where is it sent? Is it email? Is it where work gets done? Perhaps we're
Hmm.
looking at Microsoft Teams or Slack. Is there social interaction like social media? Do we now motivate through that message? Is it shorter? Is there a visual? Is there a video? Or if it's a video, no more than a minute, because who's got the attention span to go beyond a minute? Are these the kind of things that you would agree we would be looking at as we think about the future of work?
Yeah, exactly. And you sounded like an internal marketing agency, right? So it's like how are we going to connect with the people in a relevant way that sells? But what we're selling is belief in an organization, ultimately the mission, because people want to work for something that matters, period. You're not going to have talent if you don't have a great mission. So then all of a sudden we're being that. And yes, that's exactly where we had to go with the internal comment. And by the way, all those channels, we had all those, and everyone, I mean, I don't care who it is, the core of every company problem will come down to communication of some sort. And the problem is when it comes to corporate comm, who actually owns it? I would make a point that experience should own it, because that communication has to be authentic through every channel. And we shut down more channels than we opened up. And that caused frustration at the beginning because people were like, I like this, I like this. And there are certain channels out there that drove me crazy. And so when we unified the channels, and then we got the right software so that we could kind of broadcast it in a way that's brand savvy, that gets people to hear that we made a huge difference. The other thing that I will tell you is everything changed overnight, the day on April 20th or whatever that was when we sent everybody home. And the pandemic, when we did that, we were all in facility. We had 5 facilities. We loved being around the water cooler together. We did events together, big old things. That all changed. And so we had to make a decision at that point. And Adam, we doubled down, tripled down on communications. Internal comm became the lifeline. I sent out 2 times a week an update on where we're at in the pandemic, how safe our facilities are, what we're doing, how we're thinking about you, just so that I could lower, I wanted that psychological safety level higher and I could lower fear. Okay. And so that helped us keep momentum, even though everybody's life just transformed and they went from working in an office to working in their living room. And it almost overnight. I had our facility and maintenance team driving systems to people's houses, dropping them off at the door, everything that we could do so that we wouldn't disrupt business. But we had to double down on that communication. So you probably have a good point. I don't know that we were that smart. Amy might have been that smart. I don't know that I was. I just thought it was smart because it was too noisy and I couldn't get my messaging across. And my leaders and my managers, which by the way, we have a group called the SPMG. That whole group answers up through me in terms of my influence on them. So I'm constantly biweekly newsletters. What do they need to help engagement? What do they need to hear about the company? We have live meetings, annual meetings, summits for that group because I think they're the ones that influence the most people, both internally and externally. So that's another thing. But it comes back to communication.
And in that communication, and maybe if Jennifer at Park Tech is listening or Ben at Vision Solar,
Yeah.
they've created internal publications.
Yes.
And I know even with Vision Solar, they have a video studio where they're producing content internally because at some point we start to think about if this is the kind of experiences we have as customers with brands, we
Yes.
expect the same experience internally. Why not? Why don't we want to be entertained in
Brilliant.
both places?
Yeah.
So Mark, let's go into a future with me.
Okay.
Let's say we, as the innovators, will manifest this emerging. Well, you already have in your organization, but let's assume it catches fire, and we
Okay.
go from 2.5% to we start to get into early adapters, and it moves on. And with it, it's going to bring forward all kinds of investment into technologies and best practices and standards. So when we go back to the email that you were sending out, you were thinking about sending out a communication, not email, because I think email is going to start to fade out. I think we need to meet them where they are. As marketers would say, let's just focus on the channel.
Yes.
But also, when you click that send button, are we going to get in a world of like serious segmentation? Are we now going to look at, like your audience internally the way you look at external audiences, and you will have access to all of the data that's available, and you go, okay, well, if I'm going to talk about our mission and send an update, is it the same update based on the role, location, performance level? Don't know. Maybe the wording is a little different on a manager versus a new manager versus a manager in the same role. How far down would we go in the future state to think about segmentation in the pursuit of relevance, in the pursuit of personalization?
Yeah. Well, you nailed it, and we're already thinking that way, right? How do we segment our our internal software already allows us to segment, and so we are delivering different messages to different groups depending. Now, Signature Performance used to be, highly Nebraska organization. We were all pretty close to each other. Now we're across the country. So now what's happening is I have pockets of associates because word of mouth in different places. North Carolina, people in North Carolina love to work at Signature Performance. I love to have them here. So now I'm communicating to them, and we're doing our, specific kind of reach to kind of talk about, well, what do we know about North Carolina? What's it like to live there? Who are they? What's the team? Where can they get the cup of coffee together? So we're seeing these pockets form, and that segmentation is even more important. And I would take it a step further. So when you talk about experience management, we've always talked about kind of experience management in terms of our response to what's being said. I think, Adam, the next thing we're going to start listening in real time. I think we're seeing AI begin to populate that space, and these channels that we've created, we're going to be always on, not to be spies. And by the way, I have mixed feelings. I mean, this is pushing me, just to be honest. But if I know that there's a problem or a tension or something internally, I can respond to it before it becomes a problem. And so it has a lot of relevancy. How do I have a real life dashboard that's capturing through analytics what the sentiment is, the feeling, the mood of the organization? Then I, as the organizational coach, can rally the troops around the right areas before it becomes a problem, not after it becomes a problem. So, right now we survey. I don't know if the answer is more surveys, but we're quarterly, one external, 4 quarterly, and then based on what I find, we just did an external survey. And I did one more pulse for internal benefit survey so I could collect the data. Our people love to talk. They love to be heard. They love to see their ideas innovated. we take those ideas through what's called our diversity circle, because I want to make sure if we make changes, it's infecting everybody the same. So we have all these outlets, but I think we're going to be really proactive in how we hear. And what's going to really be different is we're going to use segmentation along with some form of AI to help us read sentiment and take that sentiment and put it into action. And so then we won't, have any of the kind of dips in the road, because we're going to really know what the sentiment is. So I think that has to be part of the future.
No, you didn't. You didn't just open the AI door conversation. Oh,
Right.
you did. I was holding from it coming into our
Oh,
discussion, but
right.
I'll try to be brief to react, because you're so right. You're so spot on. I've been thinking about how to simplify where it fits, like just because
Mhm,
so much complexity.
mhm.
Check this out, Mark. Tell me what you think. Okay,
Okay.
I've had two dots in my mind. There's a dot one, data,
Mhm.
segmentation, personally relevant. All of the experience sits inside data, right? When
Yeah,
we think about it organizationally,
has to.
all the way on the other side, I've been thinking about replacing the word message with a nudge. Now, obviously, biased alert. Like,
Yes.
I've been in a nudge world for years now,
Mhm.
but also as I'm a co-founder of an agency, Mably. I'm a co-founder of a technology company, but ultimately we experience the world of nudges today for
Yes.
the most part.
Yes.
Now, if we agree those two dots,
Mhm.
the dot in between, I believe, is AI. Now, there's a lot involved in between,
Mhm.
and I am just as scared as you. I use my word. I am
Right.
scared for
Yes.
what this means to us. I am uncomfortable with a lot of it. I've been playing with ChatGPT, and oh my goodness, I'm going to have
Mhm.
episodes where I'm going to play with it live and share with the audience.
Mhm.
But do we think data, AI, nudge for the best experience to impact our business objectives? Is this kind of the highest level? Anything you would change there?
No, I think you're right. I love the term nudge. That makes sense to me, because it's not what I love about nudge. It takes the fear out of it, because the fear is manipulate. But we're not trying to do that, but we are trying to nudge. And if an organization can listen enough to give positive nudges in the right direction, just think about that from a coaching perspective on a sports field. Think about that from a coaching perspective there. It's just perfect. It's a flow, and that will allow people to show up and be in that zone or in that flow more often, because we're constantly offering that. So it's exciting, yeah, and scary. But I love the term nudge. I think you're onto something there, and that's exactly where it should lead. Qualtrics has already began to advance their analytics and the listening capabilities through that, and that's just a tool I'm familiar with, and so we use, and so it's it's there, right? So we can do that. How we use that is going to be really important, and when it comes to AI, let me just give you an example, a production example. Okay, so we are fortunate to partner with the Veterans Administration. We do a lot of federal work, and so sometimes when we're interacting with different people, veterans, there's different things that come up. What if there's a AI technology that can help us to determine sentiment in a phone call, that can help us capture when someone might be experiencing PTSD in the moment, and be able then to rally the proper people, which aren't us, but the proper people, to help and to do the right thing. So I think that's an external thing that has me excited about how do we help humanity. Internally, we could do the same thing. How do I know when someone's about ready or experiencing burnout? Well, if I have the right sentiments getting delivered to me, I won't ever know for sure. I don't trust it that much, but I do trust that if I'm listening and if I'm nudging, in your words, I think I can have a positive impact in that associate's life, probably improve retention and performance over the long run.
Oh my goodness! And I saw recently what's possible with Microsoft Graphs as
Hmm.
their technology is improving, and the ability to be able to see, for example, if someone is working from home, right,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden their activity on Microsoft Teams stopped
Hmm.
or dropped 90%. What does that mean? That someone is isolated? And then
Right.
if you understand from a coaching perspective where they are or where they
Hmm.
are in terms of their projects, if projects stopped or something is going on, you can identify and support someone. Again, all of these things could be
Yeah.
used in an entirely wrong direction. So it's subject to
Mhm.
organizations creating the right regulation, governance,
Right.
intent,
Yeah.
confidentiality. And there's a lot Microsoft has done too in order to ensure that you can't
Yeah.
see certain data because it is, we don't want to infringe on privacy, but these
Exactly.
signals will be used to create a positive change.
Mhm.
And so Mark, and I could go on with you for hours. I feel like I just want to learn from you, learn from all aspects. But as we start to kind of talk about next steps, you mentioned in our conversation it started for you with belief, right?
Mhm.
Getting the executive team to believe in this, and that opened the door. I
Yeah.
would imagine you are fortunate, which is why you're an innovator and you're seeing the success you're seeing, that executive team believed in this vision.
Mhm.
Most listeners, most audience members who are innovators inside organizations are probably not going to be as fortunate as you. So, what advice could we give them in order for them to go after the experience budgets? Because ultimately, it's about the budget.
Yeah.
We got to get the budget to bring in, whether it's full time, whether it's external support, whether it's technologies, it's the budget. How do they, what does a step one look like in order for them to begin their journey? And let's assume belief is off the
Yeah.
table, unless you think that's the only way to begin.
Yeah. No, I would say this, that all business is in the business of experience, all business. And that is what has to be manifest. And so we start our journey by truly understanding what is XM, what is experience. And if we can center and really grasp the power of experience and what it is, then it's easy to bring it to life. And once you start that conversation and start to look, we're doing it in talent all the time, right? I mean, if you look at how HR has evolved and de-evolved, right? We're taking parts of it and we're bolting it on because we want to add human element to this compliance related world and touch. So we've already started it. All we're doing is adding another avenue into it. And the fact is, everybody is in the experience business. So if we could anchor our knowledge and really understand it to where we can talk to it, where we understand the data. One of the things I like to do, Adam, I drive around, I have a little car, and my license plates say BU. And my partner came in one day and said, I really like that. That's a good one. So you, Mark. But I think you need a caveat. It's like be you and know your stuff. And that's it. When you know your stuff, all your marketing information, everything that we can glean externally, we can bring internally. We just started internally. I'm late to the game externally because we built it internally. And now as we're seeing through different avenues, other organizations joining with us, man, I'm slow because I'm saying no, before you're going to jump on our brand, you got to understand us. You got to start living it and feeling it. And I think that's an important component. So I would just say, really study what experience is, understand the management and the science behind it. And then just start the conversations because it's easy to take root once there is a real clear understanding of what it is.
And you said the word XM or abbreviation. You're talking about
Yeah.
experience management.
Yes. Experience management, XM. Yep.
I think it's fascinating. It hasn't come up yet. I'm almost, as you're speaking, I'm almost like, how do we create a course around Mark and what he's done? And it's not just Mark. It's not just Mark. You have an entire team. You mentioned this multiple times. The brilliance
Yes.
that you've
Yes.
unified. So it's not a Mark course, but really you were the visionary behind this, and you were fortunate to both get the buy-in and find the people that saw what you saw and then executed on that vision well to bring forth
Yeah.
the results. And now it's like, how do we codify it? How do we operationalize where you are? And your journey is not done, right?
Right.
This is
Right.
this is a frontier that we keep
Yeah.
pushing. What is next? External is not done. Nothing is ever done.
Right.
You just
Exactly.
happen to be further than the 99.99% of the organizations. I gotta stop myself, otherwise I'll keep going. Listen, Mark, I from the bottom of my heart, just and on behalf of the audience, just a huge thank you for taking the time. You and I've had multiple conversations, exchanged emails. I know you're busy, you have a lot going on, so unless you're holding some final thoughts, I just wanted to say a huge thank you.
Yeah, well, right back at you, Adam. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for bringing this to light. I love the conversation, and I think it's an important one. So keep it up, and I appreciate you letting me be a part of it.
Oh, I intend to rev up. I'm just going to. I'm just getting warmed up from here. As you and I talked before we started, the association potentially or other ideas. How do we bring the innovators together? Because I think we could do a lot of good. Mark, thank you again, and over now.
Yep. Thank you.